Hello, I'm Barbara Fox, and this is the third in a series of introduction to button stories that I'm doing for Stonebridge. And this will be a little bit different because this will be how you can create a button gift or a button honor for a friend, or put together a button tray about a place, or to honor a historic person. So I did that for a museum presentation at Couser Farm. Couser Farm, you may know, is in Hamilton. We'll look at it in a minute. And the doyenne of this mansion, built in the last half of the 19th century, was Teresa Dolger Couser. I happen to know the great granddaughter of Teresa Couser. And so we've put together this card of buttons honoring this historic personage. But you could do this for anybody. It could be for your granddaughter with fun buttons showing their interests. So let's get started and I'll show you what I mean. Every button has a story. How do buttons tell stories about people? You can tell a story by creating a theme card. This is the Halloween card about any kind of celebration. You could create a button story about COVID if you wanted to. You can mount your buttons in all kinds of creative ways. This card on the right is a prepared card that you can buy, or you can make your own cards that are beautiful or draw them. You can decide to put have your button card or tray reflect a hobby of the person you're giving it to. So this is all different kinds of insect buttons. You could do a card about teachers, for instance. And this is my card of how I honored this Victorian woman. And the card reflects her interests. And for my information on Couser Farm, I am grateful to Sally Lane and to Tom Glover. Teresa was the doyenne of Couser Farm Mansion, built in 1892 in Hamilton Township. She was the daughter of a German brewer. She was born in 1862, raised in New York City. She was quite wealthy, both from her father and her husband. She married in 1884. She had 10 children, 6 girls and 4 boys. And she was 63 when she died in 1926. And I love this picture of Teresa because it's got buttons down the front. This is a picture of this Queen Anne style Victorian mansion that's owned now by Hamilton Township. We're going to make this tray of buttons honoring Teresa Couser. First, we're going to take a tour of Teresa's home. So be on the lookout in this video for how we might find Teresa buttons to reflect Teresa's interest. Let's watch. We're going to glimpse the history of Mercer County as we talk about Teresa Dolger Couser, the Victorian matriarch of Couser Farm Mansion. The span of her lifetime, 1862 to 1926, was the heyday of beautiful buttons made for women to wear. This was formerly the summer home of Fred and Teresa Couser. Fred was the oldest child of Rudolf and Rosalie Kuser, who immigrated respectively from Switzerland and Austria. Fred grew up in Trenton, and he built this summer home across the street from the farm owned by his parents. All of this paneling was done by German crafters. The Dolgers had 10 children. There's a picture of her right there. The Dolgers had 10 children, all born in New York City. This magnificent Queen Anne style country home, built in 1892, was part of a 70-acre estate. 22 acres of that remain. Look at all this magnificent detail.
Arbor Myers.
So I'm told by Sally Lane, the great-granddaughter, that for the summer, this family would bring 2 or 3 servants from New York and then hire local people. So Fred and Teresa, Fred became a brewmaster of the Peter Dolger Brewery. This Delft bedroom, by the way, each of these Delft tiles is individual. So what are we looking at that we can use to find subjects for buttons? Right here is the office, and we begin to learn about the family's business interests. Turns out they were early investors in the movie company that's now Fox, and they were early investors in an automobile company called Mercer Automobile. And we're going to have other items to think about when we talk about the boys' bedroom, what sports they played. The Kusers had the county's best clay court, so you know that all the children played tennis. And we'll look at what was on this sewing table a little later. She had a page of covered buttons here. It's just fun to see all these old things. Here comes, oh, I'll show you the covered buttons later. And the beautiful tiles. So this family, this mansion after COVID will be open again, and it's free, but it's lovely to have this nice talk, to have this nice view of it right now. Okay, back to buttons. Are you thinking about who you might do a button tray for? I'm not artistic, but maybe you are. It could be just 1 or 2 buttons that you put on the tray with your own artwork. So here we are in the Delft bedroom. What buttons could be used to illustrate this bedroom? Well, of course, we could put blue buttons on. At the top here are clamshell buttons trimmed with blue, and at the bottom is a beautiful blue button. What could we use to illustrate the sewing room? Well, right here is covered in embroidered buttons, and this dress or this shirt or vest is on display in the Kuzer Mansion house, and these buttons are there as well. What could we illustrate to show this bathroom? Well, these china buttons are so pretty, and they were very widely used in the 19th century because they could be, formed and baked. Each pattern, and there were more than 100 different patterns. The patterns were applied by putting a sheet of decorated tissue paper over the tray of buttons before it went into the kiln. The tissue paper would be burned away, leaving the color behind. But where we really begin to get some excitement is when we think about the family's interests. So the Fox Film Company was their original investment. And so all the celebrities would come to the farm. I chose this button because I thought it represented the Fox company, but I don't think so. I think it represented the US Capitol, but the same guy who invested in Fox was also a US Senator. So we'll leave that button there. But here's a picture of the room as it looks today. And this is the button I found to illustrate movies. I think of it as a Busby Berkeley button of Dancing Girls. So the other thing we saw was the Mercer motor car wall. Well, the husband of Teresa, Fred, he partnered with the well-known Roebling family in Trenton to invest in the Mercer Motor Car Company. Here is the Mercer motor car wall that we saw with all the pictures of the cars. And here is an aluminum button of a sports car. Wouldn't that be fun? This is a Battersea aluminum button. Now, the Roeblings that they were friends with were very famous for building the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, when I first saw this button here, I was convinced it was the Brooklyn Bridge. And now that I see the picture of I'm sorry, I'm trying to move this away. Now that I see the picture of the Brooklyn Bridge, I see it's maybe not quite the same, but hey, it's a bridge, so we'll leave that button on. I think it's really London Bridge. One of the family investments was the State Fairgrounds. The brothers were Anthony and Rudolph. They were twins, and they helped finance the state fair. So we can use anything on this tray that would be found at a county fair. So here are the trotting races. Here is the this beautiful metal button. It's encased in a horse show, could be the horse races or the steeplechase races. And here is a kind of a circus thing of the child balancing on a ball. We know the State Fairgrounds now is what's now Grounds for Sculpture. Now, Anthony, Fred's younger brother, formed a utility company that turned into PSE&G, and its men would have worn uniform buttons. I'm looking for a button that would have represented that time, but I couldn't find one. Here is one for, guess what, the state penitentiary. They had uniform buttons too. And I'm sorry, I can't get rid of this. Another thing that Anthony invested in was the Audubon Society's expeditions to Asia. So these are beautiful bird buttons. This is a pigeon, and of course the egret or the stork. That's an enamel button with little pastilles around it. Teresa herself would have worn buttons revealing her interests. What were her interests? Well, for starters, she had 10 children. Her husband was brewmaster in her father's Brooklyn Brewery. It's a Peter Dolger tray and a Peter Dolger advertisement. And here is a brewery button. Yes, bigger than life size. Now, notice that Prohibition began in 1920. And you see here is the temperance drink advertisement. They made near beer in order to survive during the Prohibition. But Teresa was also a very devout Catholic. She would go up on the roof of her New York home and recite the rosary every night. So she likely could have had a Madonna button. And I'm sorry for this, I can't get this away. This is how the Madonna button would have been made. They would have copied it from the Raphael picture, and it would have been stamped out from a piece of yellow metal by this guillotine-like stamping machine. All these metal buttons were profitable enough were cheap enough for women to wear after the use of machines. As we told earlier, women didn't begin to wear these beautiful buttons until the 1875 era, which exactly mirrors Teresa's life after the Industrial Revolution. So surely she told fairy tales to her children, and you will recognize Red Riding Hood, a one-piece stamped button on the left. And I thought this was Puss in Boots, but it's also labeled Hop o' My Thumb. So take your pick. This you can see is pierced, meaning there's open places, and these are little steel pieces that are inserted. A gorgeous 19th century button. And she could have worn more than one kind of fairy tale up and down her dress. Women did that. If it was the same size, they used different patterns, different subjects. We know she played tennis. One of her daughters was a champion tennis player. The estate had a clay court, and she also liked to garden, hence the flowers. Again, both are one-piece metal buttons. And maybe her children weren't always well behaved. This metal button is called pulling hair. Teresa was wealthy. Her daughter made her debut. They had a fancy wedding at the Waldorf Astoria, and she often took an ocean liner to Europe. I could have used an ocean liner button. She could have worn, I'm saying that each one of these buttons could have been a different pattern, because women wore themed buttons like we collect today. What we would put charms on our charm bracelet. She traveled to Germany, no doubt, because that was her father's home. And this is a picture of Rome. I'm sure she went there. And maybe she went to Scotland. This little cute figure, cost maybe $2. This button you could get for $10, $15, or $20, depending on where you bought it. Teresa could also choose buttons made from different materials, as well as focusing on the subject of the button. So far, we've seen glass buttons, clamshell, china, metal, ivory. This was ivory, plastic, aluminum, and enamel. Here are some more kinds of button materials that she could have used. This is black glass, made very popular when Queen Victoria was in mourning. But these buttons have pearl inlay and gold etched inside. And these are beautiful small buttons, about a ½ inch wide. And they're not terribly expensive. She could have worn rubber buttons that were actually made in New Brunswick. All the rubber buttons have a Goodyear patent on the back, and that's another fun story. She could have worn these perfume buttons. Well, bathing wasn't that prevalent at that time of the turn of the century, and so a woman could soak these velvet buttons with her perfume and carry her perfume with her wherever she went. She could have worn these gay 90s buttons, which are big jewels. This is one from a show I saw in Downton Abbey, and this is the actual jewel button that I found to put on Teresa's tray. Her servants would no doubt have had livery, and these are livery buttons, again from Downton Abbey. And here are the fabric buttons that we see on the sewing machine. Again, from a Downton Abbey exhibit. Fabric buttons on the servants' clothes are not real fancy. Teresa died suddenly in 1926. She was 63 years old. Now, Prohibition had been going along for 6 years, but because they had near beer, because they were selling near beer, the family was evidently okay. Why collect buttons at all? Because, as Dickens liked to say, there is surely something charming in seeing the smallest things done so thoroughly, as if to remind the careless that whatever is worth doing at all is worth doing well. I'm so glad you could go with me on this journey. I remind you that it's fun to collect buttons just for themselves. And because when you honor an individual, you make that person or their family very, very happy. Here we are at 2 New Jersey State Button Society members on the left with family members on the right, Sally Kuser Lane and her daughter, Sally Lane, relatives of Teresa Kuser. So think about doing this. I can help you. If you have questions about buttons, I'm Barbara Figge Fox. My extension is 4804, or you can tell people to email buttonsinnewjersey@gmail.com or go to the New Jersey State Button Society.com website. I'm happy you could come along with me on this journey. Do reach out if you have questions, and I'm happy to take this show on the road to anybody else who wants to see it. Have fun